Good morning to everyone not on the East Coast, and let me be among the very first to wish a happy afternoon to those of you here on the East Coast as I am here in Washington, D.C. Thank you all for joining us. I'm David Kiva. I'm the president of EDF Action. I've been here at EDF Action for just about a year, and it's been such an honor to help lead the way forward for the advocacy partner of the Environmental Defense Fund. One of my favorite things, absolute favorite things about this job is meeting activists and volunteers nationwide that are fighting for climate progress. I saw it before the elections, where I spent some time out on the ground in Nevada and in New Hampshire, along with some of the activists and supporters and members of EDF Action and the candidates who we were supporting, going out knocking doors, seeing the energy and enthusiasm that our EDF Action members bring to everything that they do, and their enthusiasm for delivering climate action is really inspiring and makes me knock a couple extra doors when I'm out there. I've also seen it at rallies for our legislative priorities, especially at a couple of rallies that I got to attend last year at the Supreme Court, where EDF Action led the way, but where the entire climate community and all of the groups that care about advocating on our shared priorities were out speaking with one voice, but we showed up in a big, big way. So the big part of this call, it's meant to be a two-way conversation. First of all, we want to hear from you what you think our priorities are. We want to hear from you what excites you the most, but we also want to share with you where we think that things are going and where we think we've got the biggest and best opportunity in order to make progress as we move forward. So we're going to talk about three key places where we think that there's a real chance for us to make progress. First, at the federal level, we're going to talk a little bit about our opportunity to make progress on our EDF Action and EDF's regulatory agenda, how we can shape the strongest possible rules to be as protective of public health and reduce emissions as much as we possibly can, and how you can take action on it. Secondly, we're going to share a little bit about what the legislative roadmap looks like at the federal level. EDF and EDF Action still see great opportunity, even after making enormous progress with the passage of the Inflation Reduction Act last year, for us to continue to put our head down, focus on the work, and focus on building real, durable solutions for the climate crisis at the federal level and passing laws that will make a difference in people's lives. And then third, it's just third in program order. It is not third in terms of order of importance. We're going to have a conversation between one of my colleagues here at EDF, Steve Cochran, who leads our state affairs program, but who leads it from his home in Louisiana and is deeply enmeshed in Louisiana politics, and the newest member of Louisiana's Public Service Commissioner, Commissioner Devontae Lewis, about where they see an opportunity for progress at home. So in addition to having a couple of these conversations that we're going to be bringing to you, my colleagues who are engaged in them, Emily Wurzbo with our federal affairs team and Steve Cochran, who leads our state affairs work, are going to be in conversation with me and with all of you about it to answer your questions and hopefully lend a little bit of inspiration and to get you guys watching this at home more inspired to take even more action in 2023 than you took in 2022. 2022 was absolutely, I think, the greatest year in EDF Action's history in terms of us rolling up our sleeves and showing what we all can do, and in terms of climate progress at the federal legislative level. I believe that history will judge 2022 as the year that the United States, the biggest emitter in the world, finally got really serious about leadership in addressing a problem that we had an outsized role in helping to create. So first and foremost with our program, I'm delighted to bring you a conversation that my colleague, Jack Pratt, EDF Action Senior Director for Political Affairs, had yesterday with my former boss, the chair of the Council on the White House, of the White House Council on Environmental Quality, the Honorable Brenda Mallory. So with that, we'll tee up Jack and Chair Mallory's discussion yesterday about the specific role that the Council on Environmental Quality at the White House is having to drive change and progress on environmental justice and so many of our climate priorities.
Welcome. I'm Jack Pratt. I'm Senior Political Director at EDF Action, and I'm really pleased to be joined here by the chair of CEQ, Brenda Mallory. So thank you so much for spending some time with us and taking some time from your busy day to talk with EDF Action.
Thank you, Jack. It's a
Well,
pleasure to be here.
maybe I could start there and just ask, for those who don't know, what is CEQ and what does it do, and how do you see the role here?
Absolutely. So, well, first of all, it's just such a pleasure to have a chance to speak to EDF Action, one of the organizations of EDF that I actually spent some time observing many times in the past. And so I just really appreciate the work that's being done there. CEQ, created under the National Environmental Policy Act in 1970, is an environmental office within the White House. And our job from the beginning has been to advise the president on environmental, natural resource, and now climate change issues. In 1970, we weren't saying we were advising on climate change issues, but in fact, we were. And so we work across the federal government to try to bring the agencies together around policy that advances the president's agenda.
That's interesting. And so every administration, right, is going to have a different approach. How do you see your approach maybe a little different from past administrations in this position?
Well, there's no question that the agenda for CEQ is very much driven by the president's agenda. And in this administration, climate change and environmental justice are central to the president's work. And those are two areas in which CEQ has responsibility. And in the case of environmental justice, primary responsibility for helping to organize the efforts across the federal government.
Well, could you speak to that a little bit? I mean, we obviously had these two great accomplishments advance last year and the year before in the bipartisan infrastructure law, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act. How do those impact that work on and attention to environmental justice issues?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the great benefits of both pieces of legislation, which the president really did work hard and personally in making sure that we achieve those results. Both pieces of legislation really assist us in both legacy pollution issues that have impacted communities all across the country. Now, we're talking about basic issues that relate to air quality and water pollution. And both statutes allow for funding that help with legacy pollution issues. But I think excitingly, and I think most importantly, the goal of the Inflation Reduction Act in particular is focused on creating that next generation clean energy economy and ensuring that all communities get the benefit of that. So the bill is structured so that it will help advance the development of clean energy manufacturing in communities and providing work opportunities for people to work on these new industries.
Well, those are really exciting opportunities, and obviously those keep you very busy. You mentioned though that CEQ dates back to the 1970s. So we covered a little bit about what's different maybe now. What's the same? What are the constants from going back to the 70s?
Yeah, I mean, at core, again, CEQ's mission is around environmental policy. And I would say, just as an example, conservation is something that CEQ has always had a critical role in across administrations, and that's true in this case as well, in this administration as well, where we work with the president and senior policy advisors to advance conservation. And in this case, the president has made a commitment and a conservation goal to protecting and preserving 30% of the lands and waters by 2030. That's novel. No president has done that previously. And so we're helping to try to bring that to reality.
Well, you came into this job with tremendous experience, but I wonder if there was any piece of advice, unsolicited advice maybe, that you got before you came into this job that you really valued.
Oh my goodness. Before I came into this job, let me see. I think given the work that I had done previously, I think that the one thing people just advised me to do is to sort of hold on to the anchors that have always helped to direct me in the way that I both do my work, but also how I do my work. And I think that has been very important. CEQ is a place where, the people and the kind of the spirit of the people is really important. And so I really work to kind of cultivate that.
Well, Chair Mallory, we so much appreciate your spending time with us. And I know that our members really value everything you're doing, and we don't want to take too much time away from the valuable work you're contributing every day. So thank you so much for spending time with us and with EDF Action.
Absolutely. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for what you do.
Thank you.
Wow, that was great. It's so neat to see Jack in conversation with Brenda Mallory, who's somebody who I deeply admire, who's really driving progress on the federal level at the Council on Environmental Quality every single day at the White House. And I hope, like me, you could hear her commitment and how seriously she takes these issues and how hard she's working to address them. And Jack did a terrific job of sitting down with her and interviewing her. Next up, we're going to focus a little bit more concretely on both legislative progress and what we can expect in terms of the regulatory agenda and other places that we can make progress. So I'm delighted to turn things over to two of my favorite colleagues who I get to see in the office here every day. Emily Wurzba, who's part of our federal affairs team, and Cecile Brown, who helps make sure that folks learn about the work that we're doing and that it doesn't stay behind the scenes. She's a key part of our communications team here at EDF Action, helping to drive things forward. So now to you, Emily and Cecile.
Hey, it's Cecile from the communications team with EDF Action, and I'm super thrilled to be here with Emily Wurzba to do a quick Q&A on congressional action and what we've got coming in the pipeline for 2023. Emily, can you start by just telling us a little bit about yourself and your role at EDF Action?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. So I'm Emily. I'm a senior manager on the federal affairs team, and I work on all sorts of issues, mainly our transportation electrification portfolio. So really excited to talk with you all today.
So first question, what were you most excited about seeing being included in the Inflation Reduction Act?
Great question. So many things. So the Inflation Reduction Act truly was a historic investment in climate change, clean energy, transportation, manufacturing. It's $369 billion towards those issues, and experts say it's going to get us up to 40% towards our emission reductions goals of cutting our climate pollution in half by 2030. So truly significant progress that we're talking about here. I think one thing that I'm particularly excited about is just the fact that tax credits were extended for a full 10 years, which is giving business certainty for things like energy efficient buildings, solar farms, wind turbines, commercial vehicles that are electric, things that will also help out the consumer, like appliances that are more energy efficient or used in new personal electric vehicles. So the fact that these tax credits were extended for 10 years is a really, really big deal. As somebody who works on transportation electrification, I'm also thrilled that the U.S. Postal Service got all this money to electrify their fleet of vehicles. The bill really importantly also included environmental justice block grants to help with air pollution and air quality monitoring and making sure that there's better community engagement in the process. I also think it's really important to flag that the bill is including a first ever fee on methane emissions to help with the Biden administration's efforts to reduce methane emissions from the oil and gas fields. So tons of really, really great things. As you can see, I could go on and on here, but I think it was a really historic legislation, and it was so critical, the efforts of EDF Action, of our membership. I think really without their advocacy, it wouldn't have gotten done.
Yes, so well said. I think, the cool thing about this overview that you gave us is that we all stand a chance to benefit from IRA, whether it's the business community, whether it's the small business community, everyday individuals. We've all got a lot to look forward to with this huge, monumental, historic climate funding.
Yeah.
Can you break down the omnibus bill that was passed in December and tell us what we can see from the climate perspective?
Yes, so in December, Congress passed with bipartisan support a major omnibus bill that will keep the government funded for fiscal year 2023. This was a really huge deal because it included critical funding that is necessary to actually implement the bipartisan infrastructure law that passed last Congress, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act. So this omnibus includes critical funding that's going to go to agencies like the EPA, the Food and Drug Administration, and NOAA. And that funding is really essential for these agencies to be able to carry out really essential tasks such as cleaning our drinking water, ensuring that there are not toxins in baby food, helping to address sea level rise, all sorts of really critical issues. And so what's also really important about this omnibus passing is that this is now a higher baseline level of climate funding that this current Congress will now be operating from. And so as this current Congress is working on their appropriations bills for this coming year, this is the baseline that they'll be working off of.
Excellent. So as we look ahead to a more divided Congress, what will our priorities be, and how can we still make climate progress?
So a divided Congress certainly poses some challenges, but there are also some exciting opportunities that we see. So first is the Farm Bill. And the Farm Bill includes critical conservation programs to help farmers address climate change, clean their water, and be more prepared in the face of extreme weather events. And the Inflation Reduction Act actually included nearly $20 billion for agriculture conservation programs. And so we have this really important role of being able to defend that investment and ensure that they pass a separate farm bill that will continue to build on those investments in the conservation and environmental programs. So that's one really big thing we'll be focused on. Additionally, there's going to be a lot of opportunities where kind of our network's voices are going to be critical in order to protect all the investments that we made from the Inflation Reduction Act and really make sure that Congress does not roll back any of that important funding.
Super important work that we've got going on in 2023 to protect the progress that we've made, and also just the Farm Bill opportunity sounds amazing. I feel like a lot of times people, when we think about climate change, we don't really think about how much it touches our lives. And I know the agriculture issue is huge, and it's a great opportunity to protect jobs and small farmers and agriculture companies, but also to protect our own food security so that we can continue to grow food right here in the U.S. domestically. So question number 4, is the appropriations process still important this year?
Absolutely. The appropriations process is going to continue to be essential once again. It's going to be critical that agencies have the funding that they need to protect public health, to clean our drinking water, to build out these climate investments. And so even though we made a ton of progress in these past 2 years, our work is not over. We cannot stop, and really just looking forward to continuing to work with all of you all to make your voices heard and to encourage members of Congress to pass the strongest climate budget that they can in this next year.
So our Q&A is about to come to a close, but before we close this session, Emily, is there anything else that our EDF Action members should know?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just so important to remember that while we've had the most amazing past 2 years in terms of climate advocacy, there's still more work to be done. And now is the perfect time, if you haven't already, to communicate with your member of Congress and to begin to build that relationship, get to know them, and provide that support that they need to continue to be climate champions for our public health, for justice, and for our climate.
Yeah, well said. Climate voters unite. We're getting together and we're taking action.
Climate voters unite. We're getting together and we're taking action. I couldn't have said it better than my friend and colleague Cecile. I also wanted to highlight something else that she said in her discussion with Emily, which is that we all stand to benefit from the important action that we're taking to address the climate crisis, including the Inflation Reduction Act, but so much more. We are, all of us here at EDF and EDF Action, doing this for a simple reason. We know it'll make a difference in people's lives. So I'm delighted in a little bit to welcome Emily back to be part of our panel discussion and to answer some of the audience questions that we have. I think her enthusiasm for the work that she's doing, but also her deep knowledge of all of the various ways to pull levers in order to make progress really came through in that interview. And so I hope you'll ask her some questions. We've got one more segment though before we get to the Q&A. That's my friend Steve Cochran, who's based in Louisiana, but who leads all of EDF Action's state affairs work. EDF Action is now in 13 different states trying to drive progress at the state level, because we know that's perhaps in some ways the greatest area of growth and opportunity for us to make meaningful climate progress and address environmental injustice. Steve is going to be joining us in conversation with somebody who he knows well, Devontae Lewis, who is the newest member of the Louisiana Public Service Commission, elected in December with support of EDF Action and many, many others. So with that, I'll turn it over to Steve and Commissioner Lewis.
Hi, everybody. I'm Steve Cochran. I'm the Associate Vice President of State Affairs here at EDF and the Environmental Defense Action. In this role, as you would imagine, I'm often thinking about how states and local governments can participate in helping us manage the climate change, the climate crisis that we're in the middle of. And so that makes it really quite exciting for me to be able to welcome Devontae Lewis here with us. Devontae is a newly elected commissioner for the Public Service Commission here in Louisiana. And that puts him really at the heart of some of the efforts in Louisiana to try to really think about and manage an energy transition that not only can give us the sort of safer, cleaner, renewable energy that we need in America and in Louisiana, but also really think about that from the through the lens of justice and equity that has been missing for so long from these discussions. So I really want to welcome you, Devontae. Thanks for being here today, and let me just start throwing questions at you, and we can go from there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to it.
Let me start with your recent election. You come from, for folks who don't know you, you come from a strong public policy advocacy background, but didn't come in with much name recognition in a much bigger area of the state. And I think the technical term is that you kick butt. You won by about, I don't know, pretty close to 20%. But let me just ask you, what got you into this in the first place? What really made you want to come do this?
No, absolutely. I mean, I think it was just a combination of many things happening across our nation, but particularly here in the state of Louisiana. We had just been struck by a devastating Hurricane Ida, that came right after some other devastating hurricanes, Delta, Laura, and Zeta, that was showcasing the weakness of our power grid and lack of investments in our infrastructure to be resilient. And then we turned around, and in the late spring, early summer, started to see utility bills skyrocket because of the price of natural gas. So showcasing our lack of investment in renewable energy was not only making our grid less reliable, it was also really harming people's pocketbooks. And I don't think anybody was talking about the connections of how economic justice and environmental justice go hand in hand with each other, which really centers racial justice. And so this kind of bubbling up just said that we needed to have a different conversation. For too long, the conversation had centered around industry and what they felt, and not necessarily what was the needs of the people. And so we took this real David and Goliath moment and decided we were going to jump in this race and really try to at least elevate the conversation. And we did a little bit more than that. We have, I think, not only elevated the conversation, we have changed the terms of the debate and policy. And hopefully we are on a new direction and a new track here in the state of Louisiana.
So do you mind for a second, maybe because there'll be people watching this who aren't in Louisiana, you might describe a little bit just the role of the commission in this case, particularly relative to climate change, but maybe even expand just as you and I know, all of the things that the Public Service Commission ends up with some responsibility for. But I mean, obviously we're interested in the climate change component, but it might just a little bit of background there might be really helpful for folks.
Absolutely. So the Louisiana Public Service Commission is one of 11 utility regulating commissions that are elected by the people of their state. And however, we are also the only constitutional created utility commission, which means we have a lot of independent power. Some would argue that we are probably the most powerful regulator in the nation because of the independence that we have from the judiciary and the legislative branch, since our power is rested in the state's constitution. And so what we do is we regulate, as I've mentioned, utilities, wastewater, power plants, pipelines, interstate commerce, taxis, trucking, are all part of the jurisdiction of the Louisiana Public Service Commission. So when it comes directly to climate change, we are in charge of net metering when it comes to solar panels. We are the ones looking at the level of renewable energy that a utility company is using when they submit an IRP plan, or all of the co-ops, how they create their rates. And so we have a vital role to play in ensuring that we are talking about and enforcing and ensuring that we start a track to a new green economy. I like to say a just transition from a dependence on fossil fuel to a dependence on green, new, renewable, and sustainable energy that can propel our state into the future. And so the Public Service Commission will be the enforcer. We do not have a Department of Energy in the state of Louisiana, so a lot of this jurisdiction when it comes to renewable energy portfolio standard, for instance, would live and exist under the commission's jurisdiction.
So so thanks for that. I mean, I think that's helpful to have a sense. I'm not sure I realized how different we were, even in terms of being connected directly from the constitutional authority. So that's a powerful place to be. Let's dive in on climate change specifically. Louisiana, I think the latest numbers that I've seen, somewhere around 65 to 70% of the fuel source for the power generator in Louisiana is natural gas. That's a heavy dependence and something that I know you've talked a lot about or thinking a lot about how do we. So you might want to talk a little bit about that here. What is the path or paths that we need to be thinking about to move away from that and towards the sort of clean future that you're describing there?
Absolutely, you're right. Louisiana right now is probably only using about 4% of renewable energy in terms of our power grid and our power that we are producing. And so we know that this is unsustainable. And I talk about a cleaner environment for us for various reasons. First of all, we know renewable energy is now becoming cheaper. Wind and solar are cheaper than natural gas, which means people's electricity bills will be lower. Louisiana is also a place that has so many industrial plants across the state that is also causing a bunch of emissions. And so when we think about, for instance, my district alone, I represent a place that has been nicknamed Cancer Alley because Black Louisianians in my district are 6 to 21 times more likely to be exposed to air pollution and toxins than any place in the world. And so we know this transition to renewable energy would make our people healthier. We also know the transition to renewable energy would produce high quality paying jobs that would allow for a just transition. And so when I talk about a new green economy, I am talking about the affordability for people's utilities. I'm talking about the reliability of their utilities, the health of our economy, but also the health of our people. And so the Public Service Commission, in this role, we can play a vital role in ensuring we're making those investments. We are making it friendly for rooftop solars and investing in community solar projects, that we are pushing utility companies to diversify their mix. So it is not so much natural gas, and that we are talking about offshore and onshore wind, that we are talking about battery power, that we are talking about solar and pushing them in their IRP plans and their resiliency plans about how much renewable energy that they should use. And so this is an amazing time to talk about that, as the Louisiana governor has a climate action task force that has produced a plan and is working its way through its final drafts that wants us to be 100% renewable energy by the year 2030. This aligns with President Biden's push and the initiatives that we've seen from the Inflation Reduction Act, but also his goals. And so this is an important time for Louisiana to step up and be one of those users.
I'm glad you mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act. It does seem like that we're in this sort of unique moment, actually, in terms of the focus in these areas and the resources that are now coming either through tax credits or direct appropriations, most of which are going to happen at the state level, at the local level, at the individual company level, or at the individual consumer level. So I don't, if you could tell me a little bit how you think about that. It just seems like a pretty interesting time to be not just talking about what we ought to do, but actually being able to do it.
Absolutely. I mean, the IRA is giving us a lot of opportunities to do so many different things. I mean, I first think about the over 190,000 Louisianians who could get tax credits for rooftop solar. I'm thinking about the energy efficiency rebates for people to have upwards to 50 to 90% of the cost of replacing a stove or a refrigerator, or lighting in their house covered by a rebate. I'm talking about the small business grants that are in the IRA that can ensure that they are producing energy efficiently and making sure that they are using the most technology to reduce the cost and the burden on them, but also on our planet. And so this is a very exciting time to have someone, I think, who is connecting the dots between the regulatory power that we have at the Public Service Commission, but also the needed investments that we can draw down as state and localities from the IRA and the federal government. We have not seen this level of investment, especially on energy efficiency programs and in energy in decades. And so while not all of that power would lie under me in my jurisdiction at the Public Service Commission, I can play a vital role in ensuring the citizens of Louisiana know about these programs, pushing our state government to ensure that they are notifying and adequately spending these dollars in a way that can move us into the right direction. The promotions of electric vehicles, the investments, and what does it mean to rely on community solar projects. And so I think this is just such a crucial time of the next few years. I mean, I think it was no over hyperbole when I said this is our moment to act in Louisiana, and it is true. And so we are really going to be pushing forward and making sure that we utilize every single dollar to make our economy stronger and more reliable and healthier.
Remembering again why so many of us voted for you. It's a great time to be doing this. Let me ask you a last question, which is a kind of a combination of the policy and the politics. You come on to a 5-member commission, which was three Republicans and 2 Democrats, is now 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. I'd like to just hear you talk a little bit as we wrap up here, how you're the practical side of things, right? How do you actually bring people to your side? How do you actually work in this environment? I had a call from a reporter who was saying, well, it's not going to change anything. You still have 3 Republicans and 2 Democrats. And so that's just how it's not going to change anything. And I was like, I think that's kind of a narrow, cynical view of how things change. But I'd really like to hear how you're thinking about that at this point.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think when you look at the partisan makeup, of course, my election did not change the numbers. Those who identify as Democrats are still in the minority with 2 votes, and those who identify with Republicans as 3. But I think what most people don't realize is this commission is not as partisan as its a facade is given. We've already seen a 3-2 majority break since my election. We were able to elect Foster Campbell, a longtime Public Service Commission member who's been on the board for 22 years, a fierce advocate for renewable energy, and someone who has stood up and fought against utility companies for the people of Louisiana. And we brought on a Republican to join Foster and myself in electing him the chairman of the commission. And so what I like to tell people, that this commission really is about risk. It is about whether or not you want more risk to be on consumers or you want more risk to be on utility companies. And so I think the way we're going to do this is there's now a voice and a strong advocate for renewable energy. And so, and not to belabor about my predecessor, but I think there was some misnomers about his positions on renewable energy. And I don't know if he, while he voted very correctly sometimes, was necessarily an aggressive advocate. Right. And so that means you weren't pushing the conversation, you weren't pushing the needle. And I think at times he was more of a swing vote than we gave credit to, which means if you are a more aggressive Republican who wants to talk about consumer options, for example, or resiliency of our grid, it's very hard if you don't have that 3rd vote to do so. And I think now we're in a position where there are 2 strong votes in favor and a 3rd vote who is coming along the way. But I would also not count on 2 of our other members who may just need some real aggressive nature of listening to them and finding avenues to start cracking the needle. And we're starting to see that. We're starting to see some votes against our investor-owned utility who has had a monopoly on the state, where all 5 commissioners are looking for other options for consumers. And so I think there's going to be a lot of work to be done. It's not going to be easy. It's not going to happen overnight. I'm reminding myself that this is a 6-year term and I don't have to do it all in the first month. And so I'm telling everybody else, it's going to be a little bit of a long haul, but I think we are building the trust, we're building the connections with the other 4 members to start talking about the issues that really matter and really hopefully to move the needle. And that's why I'm really hopeful in the next few months that I will introduce a docket to create a renewable energy portfolio standard for the state of Louisiana. And I think we'll have the votes to start. That docket doesn't mean it's going to be done. It's going to take a lot of work to actually have it passed. But if we start the conversation and start having our investor-owned utilities and our co-ops answer these questions and have people intervene about why we need to move to a renewable energy and talk about that duration, it'll be great. And so these are the conversations that we're having, and we're working for it. It's I would tell you it's been a busy 24 days on the job. I mean, it feels like I've already done a 6-year term, but it's only been 24 days, and so I'm looking forward to the next 24 days to hopefully make some more things happen.
Fantastic. Well, we're looking forward to it as well, and so happy not only to have you here with us today, but absolutely to have you in this role. So look forward to working with you going forward. Thanks again for all this. Congratulations. And we'll see you down the road, man. It's going to be fun.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And thank you all who watched this race and supported this race. And I'm ready to do the work, and let's get it done.
Wow. That was so inspiring. Excuse me. I'm so inspired. I started coughing. Now we're going to welcome back one of our interviewers, Steve Cochran, who leads our state affairs work, and one of our interviewees, Emily Wurzba. And they're both going to be interviewed by me and by you. We're going to ask some questions of them of what we can do. It's hard not to be inspired by folks like Devontae Lewis running for the newest commissioner on the Louisiana Public Service Commission. I took to heart that he mentioned that he's been elected to a 6-year term and he's only 25 days into that term. And so he's got some time to do the important work, but also that he's very clearly expressed what his priorities are and what his motivation is and who he's trying to help. And that won't change over these next 6 years. So with that in mind, Steve, one of our viewers, Kelly, was thrilled to hear from Commissioner Lewis, as was I. And what she asked is, what would you do to encourage folks in other states to learn more about offices like their Public Service Commission, where they have an opportunity? And, it's not as well known as the governorship, but where there's a real opportunity to drive progress at the state level. And are there any specific offices that you'd like to highlight for folks across the country?
It's a really good question. I mean, in Louisiana, we did some polling as we were looking at what the possibilities might be in this race. And what we found out is that virtually nobody even knew what the Public Service Commission was, let alone what it actually was required to do. And at a time when what utility decisions that utilities make are so critical to what our future is going to be, it's just not something that we can afford to do. So I would definitely encourage everyone, and there are about 11 states, I think, that have elected officials. So first of all, if I were trying to get started in another state, I would figure out whether they're elected or appointed. Either way, really learn what it is that commission does in your state. It's different in different places, but almost all of them have this utility responsibility. And at that point, you can decide whether you want to help people get involved electorally. You know, we got lucky down here. We got a great candidate, and that always matters. But the opportunity was there because people care about these things now more than they used to. And so there's an opportunity in every state. If it's not elected, it's usually appointed by a governor. So that's the next step. If you need to do that is to really engage there and say, we need people on this commission that care about people at home, that care about the utility bills and care about clean energy and care about clean air. Those people need to be on the commission so you can make that. So it's you just step into it like you do any problem you're trying to figure out. But all over the country, I think there's very little knowledge about what these commissions do. Sometimes it's a public utility commission, sometimes a public service commission. They have slightly different names, slightly different responsibilities, but an awful lot of them have this. It's a great place to really anchor some progress here.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. And I see over your head, at least on my screen, it says Climate Voters Unite. That was the theme of our engagement in the election in 2022, both in Louisiana and the Public Service Commission race, but all across the country. I spent some time in New Hampshire on the ground with Emily, helping out great candidates like Maggie Hassan and Chris Pappas and others, and had so much fun doing that. EDF and EDF Action have played such a key role in raising awareness and then driving solutions on what a super pollutant methane is, and on how corralling it is going to be the fastest way that we can take action. So I'm pleased that our members have taken note of that. And we had not one, but two questions in the chat from Nicole and Betsy asking what they can do to take action right now on methane. Emily, you want to take a shot at that?
Yeah, sure. It's great to be with you all. So the EPA just released an updated draft rule to cut methane and other harmful pollutants from the oil and gas operations across the U.S. So this draft rule is a really big step forward, but in order to meet our climate goals, we need the EPA to go even further so we can ensure that we have the strongest methane safeguards possible. So you all have an amazing opportunity to submit a public comment today to tell Administrator Regan to strengthen EPA's proposal so we can make sure that we're holding polluters accountable. So I believe I see that link now on the screen, edfaction.org/cutmethane. But I really encourage you all to take a look at that petition and submit a public comment.
Excellent. Thanks so much, Emily. We have another question that I feel I can probably jump in and address. Viewer Steve, as opposed to panelist Steve, watching at home, has read that EPA is struggling with an acute staffing shortage. Will this seriously hamper the implementation of the Inflation Reduction Act? Emily and Steve, feel free to jump in on this, but I'll just take an opening crack at that question, having come relatively recently from service in the Biden-Harris administration. There's no question that elections matter and have great consequence. There's no question that several folks who are motivated to be in public service by a desire to make people's lives better, to improve public health, and to reduce climate harms and enact environmental justice, felt really dismayed in the prior administration and left their public service because they didn't feel like their work was supported from the top. What we see today is it has been an entirely new day for this past 2 years. What I saw from my time in government service and what I saw from my colleagues, both at the White House and at the agency level, was an invigoration and a desire to drive more change forward. What we see across every single part of EDF and EDF Action's work is a recognition that continued progress and that the challenges in front of us are real, and a belief that no change that's worthwhile is ever easy. If it was easy to do, it would have already been done. But we've got our sleeves rolled up and are committed to doing everything that we can to drive progress within EPA. I think they're working to staff up as quickly as they possibly can. But I think that the reason why they wound up short was the huge blows to morale that were felt under the prior administration. And that, thank goodness, left along with the prior president 2 years and a couple of days ago. Emily, does that sound about right to you at the federal level? And what more can folks do to help us make even more progress as fast as we can and to implement the Inflation Reduction Act?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And, the EPA just has a lot to do right now. They got all this funding from the Inflation Reduction Act, which is so exciting. They're setting up new programs, and they're also working on a number of different rulemaking processes. And so I think this is just yet another reminder about why it's so important to continue to engage your elected officials on the importance for ensuring that the EPA has a robust budget and has enough funding to actually carry out the job.
Excellent. Now I'm going to assert a little bit of prerogative and ask a couple of my own questions, if that's all right. Steve, as I mentioned when I teed you up your conversation with Commissioner Lewis, you oversee all of our state affairs work, but you're based in Louisiana and are very active in the work that happens in your home state and very personally connected to it. Where outside of Louisiana did you see the most climate progress be made at the state level in 2022?
Yeah, it was you opened this discussion by talking about 2022 as an absolutely pivotal year when we look back, and And when you look at the states, it's really true. If you look, for example, let's take two of our largest states, California and New York. California really upped its ambition, moved up its timelines, and moved up its level of reductions required for climate last year, and they'll be implementing all of that this year. But they saw the opportunities associated with some of the federal legislation, and they upped their ambition and began moving forward. New York, as you all know, passed $4.2 billion bond issue to focus in on, among other things, dealing with adaptation, dealing with resilience, really dealing with climate from the ground up to make things better and more protected from the impacts that we know we're facing. And the governor is moving forward this year, having announced a cap and invest program for moving forward through the legislature. So those are huge states. They're market movers. What they do in those states reverberates around the country. Those are really big steps. And then let's say you flip to a red state, because this is not just all about blue states. Louisiana is obviously the perfect example, but Devontae mentioned the governor here actually put in place a climate task force that came back with recommendations about how to get to net zero emissions by 2050. That's in an oil and gas state, deeply red, and to see people moving forward there because they begin to understand the economics better is really encouraging, and that's what's essential. You see some of that same kind of movement in Texas. We have people on the ground in Texas and Louisiana. We see places like Florida last year. So Florida's getting a lot of mention politically because of the governor there. That's a deeply red governor who has now taken advantage of and announced $68 million worth of subsidies coming from the federal government into Florida to help electric school buses take hold in that state. That to me says we're beginning to see movement across party lines because these things make sense. They make sense politically, but they also make sense economically and for clean air, for health. I mean, it just doesn't get much better than school buses being clean and children riding them, and that's what we want to do. So I think we're seeing the kind of sparks that we need to see around the country. A lot of work to do in that sense, but on a state by state basis, we're really starting to see good progress here.
I agree that it doesn't get much better than clean school buses and seeing kids riding them. And I think it's an excellent transition back to Emily, who leads so much of our work here at EDF and EDF Action on exactly that at the federal level. There's been a huge focus in this discussion on clean air. And we heard from Commissioner Lewis about the folks who live in Cancer Alley and what a higher percentage of cancer-causing chemicals they breathe in than just about anywhere else anywhere. Another real area of focus for us right now is around the soot rule, which is currently accepting public comments. Emily, can you share with folks what folks can do to take action and perhaps why it's so important?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have another really important opportunity for everyone to take action right now with the EPA. So soot, which is officially known as particle pollution, is a really dangerous and deadly pollutant that's produced by power plants, vehicle tailpipes, industrial sources. And studies have actually found that soot causes between 85,000 and 200,000 deaths each year. So this is really important. We need the EPA to set even stronger standards that slash these emissions and will protect our air, advance environmental justice, and help safeguard our health. And so once again, another petition opportunity for you to send to the EPA on soot. Again, the link is right here on the screen, edfaction.org/soot. But now is a really important time to be communicating with the EPA about why this matters so much.
Excellent. And I think that's about a good point for us to close things down. Let me say thank you to our outside special guests, the chair of the White House Council on Environmental Quality, Brenda Mallory, the newest member of Louisiana's Public Service Commission, Devontae Lewis. Thank you to Steve and to Emily and also to Cecile and Jack for doing such a great job of showing the passion that we at EDF and EDF Action bring to our work every single day, and the expertise that helps to inform our passion, because it's not enough just to be passionate about something. You actually need to also know what it is that you're talking about. And thank you so much to each and every one of you watching at home who feel a part of what we're trying to do at EDF Action, who know how important it is, and who are committed yourselves to taking action. I'm going to ask in that spirit for folks to close out by exiting this discussion and immediately taking action to raise your voice, if you haven't already, on both the proposed soot rule that Emily just talked about, why it's so important, currently under review and accepting public comment at EPA, and also the methane rule, which, as two of our viewers at home pointed out, has been so central to EDF's work, and EDF Action have done so much to drive forward. So we're going to throw up on the screen again, I think, where to go to weigh in on both of those rules. Just edfaction.org/soot or edfaction.org/cut-methane. Do them both. You will find over time, if you've not been already, that raising your voice to engage in our political process and in our rulemaking process makes a tremendous difference. You will also find that not everybody does it. And what that does is it doesn't make your voice less powerful, it makes your voice more powerful. Because it's not like 350 million people are all sharing their opinion on important rules like the soot rule and the methane rule. Relatively few Americans take the time to take action. So if you're one of them, that means your voice will matter even more. So thank you, Steve. Thank you, Emily. Thank you, everyone watching at home. And we'd be delighted to come back and do this again soon. Thank you.